All right, this is number 5, my number 5 from section 1-2. And let's read the instructions. It says, find the general solution of the system whose augmented matrix is given below. So it sounds like it would be good enough for us to try to put this thing in reduced echelon form. So let's do that. Now notice that this is already a 1, so let's change that into a 0. We'll leave the first row the way it is. And notice, by the way, that this corresponds to a system that has 3 variables and 2 equations. We actually have more variables than equations in this case, because that's 1x1 plus 3x2 plus 0x3 equals 6. So you have 3 variables and 2 equations. And often when you have more variables than equations, you have infinitely many solutions. But let's see. Negative 4 times that plus that is 0. Negative 4 times that is negative 12, plus 11 is negative 1. The zeros aren't going to change. Negative 4 times 6 is negative 24, plus 21 is negative 3. Okay, so now let's move on to this column. And it looks like I want to change that into a 1. So obviously I'd multiply that whole second row by negative 1. Okay. Now let's try to change this thing into a 0. So I won't change the second row at all. But it's basically going to be negative 3 times the second row plus the first row. So negative 3 times that plus that is 0. Negative 3 times that plus that is 0. Negative 3 times that is negative 9 plus 6 is negative 3. All right. Okay, so how do we interpret this? Well, in this particular case, notice the equation looks like, or the system looks like this. Okay, and all right, now in this particular case, we were able to work on the first 2 columns and put them in the right form. And whenever you're able to work on a column and put it in the right form, those are called pivot columns. Okay. And notice in this particular problem that the 2 variables that correspond to the 2 pivot columns are x1 and x2, because the 2 pivot columns were the first column and the second column. So that means that x1 and x2 are both basic variables. All right. Now, column 3 was not a pivot column because we were not able to put it in the form 0, 0, 1. So anytime your column is not a pivot column, the variable that corresponds to it is a free variable. So in this case, the third column was not a pivot column. That means x3 is a free variable. So throwing some terminology at you from the PowerPoints too. All right, now x3 is a free variable. That means it can take on any value. And sometimes the basic variables are in terms of the free variable, sometimes they're not. In this case, I don't think they are, because notice that first equation can be written as simply x1 equals negative 3. The second equation can be written as simply x2 equals 3. So there is no x3 variable in this equation, and there is no x3 variable in this equation. But x3 can take on any value because it's a free variable. So how would you write the solution set? Well, you could say x1 has got to be negative 3, x2 has got to be 3, and x3 can be anything. It is arbitrary. So anytime a variable is free, it can take on any value. So that's the solution set.